Boothill will be releasing in exactly a week from now in Honkai Star Rail, and so far he's shaping up to be an amazing DPS character. And now that we finally have his kit info from both Hoyoverse and also the creator experience server videos that have dropped about 12 hours ago, today we are going to analyze Boothill's kit and his banner to see if he has enough value for you to pull for him on your account. So starting out with his kit here, we do have all the multipliers for max trace levels through Pridewin here from the creator experience server. So starting out with his basic attack, he's going to deal physical damage to a single target. Nothing super crazy on that. Just, you're not really going to be using his basic attack, honestly, because you are going to want to get the enhanced version, which is going to deal a higher amount of damage to that single enemy. And it is also important because you get the basic attack from his skill. So similarly to Xingshui's, enhanced basic attack, you cannot recover skill points, and also with blades as well. You cannot recover skill points, and you can only target the enemy that's in the standoff state, which we're going to get into right now with the skill. Which, when you use your skill on an enemy, it's going to force Boothill and that target into the standoff state, which will enhance his basic attack, and this state will last for 2 turns here. And the duration reduces by 1 at the start of Boothill's every turn, so it works the same. The duration works the same way as like the Robin and Ron May skill, where it decreases on their turn, which is very good for uptime, especially if you are getting if you're getting a lot of action with them, you have to put it up more often. But at the same time, it's not based on the enemy if some of the enemies are very fast, so that is also very good. And during the standoff, both Boothill and the enemy target will be taking increased damage. Boothill will deal 30% increased damage to the enemy that's in the standoff, and the enemy will deal 15% extra damage to Boothill. So it is also important to have a good sustain, so definitely do keep that in mind there as well. And whenever you defeat the target in standoff or you break their toughness, Boothill's going to get a stack of Pocket Trick Shot and Dispel the standoff state, and the Pocket Trick Shot stacks, we'll talk about them in the talent, but they are permanent as well, so once you get them in the battle, you'll keep it, and you have a max of 3. The skill also doesn't regenerate energy, and it does work the same way as Blade and Xingshui, where using the skill does not end the current turn, so then you would be able to use the basic, the enhanced basic attack right after. Then for Boothill's ultimate, which I think is extremely good. Firstly, it's very cheap at 115 energy. So this ultimate is going to be able to apply the physical weakness to a single enemy, lasting for 2 turns, and also deals physical damage to the enemy and delays their action by 40%. Now, this is really good because, for one, the physical weakness application makes it so that Boothill can do well in fights that are not physically weak to start with. Secondly, because of the low energy cost, you're probably not going to have too much difficulty keeping this up, either most of the time, if not all the time. And then the action delay is very nice to where you could possibly get another action out of that before the enemy goes, possibly either breaking their toughness or dealing some extra break damage to them along the way with his talent, which we're going to get into right now here. So each stack of Pocket Trick Shot will increase the enhanced basic attack's toughness reduction by 50%. So extra break efficiency is going to be very good here, and it stacks up to 3 times, so you can get a pretty insane amount of break damage there. And if the target is weakness broken when you do use the enhanced basic attack on them, based on how many Pocket Trick Shot stacks you have, you're going to be able to deal some extra break damage, even outside of when you are just breaking their toughness like normally. So if you have 1 stack of Pocket Trick Shot, it's going to be a 70% multiplier. If you have 2 stacks, it'll be 120, and if you have 3 stacks, it'll be 170. Which is extremely good because you're just going to be able to do a ton of damage even while, even without having to break the toughness gauge. If it's already broken, you're still going to be able to deal some very strong damage. And the max toughness that you can take into account for this damage can't exceed 16 times the base toughness reduction of the regular basic attack, which if that's at 30, it'd be a 480% maximum, or 480 toughness damage maximum, which is still an insane amount. And then just I think it's just like a quality of life kind of thing for Boothill. When you win the battle, you can retain Pocket Trick Shot for the next battle, which won't really come into play, I think, when it comes to like endgame content, but could be something for like Simulated Universe possibly. Then for his technique, he's going to be able to apply the same physical weakness application to the enemy as he does his ultimate for 2 turns on the first use of his skill, which is really good, honestly, so that you can have a bit more uptime and have that physical weakness right away instead of having to wait to use your ultimate. Then we move on to his traces here, which he does have some very strong traces. Firstly, for Ascension 2, which I think is probably the most important trace here, you get he's gonna get an increased crit rate and crit damage by an amount equal to 10% of his break effect for crit rate and 50% of his break effect for crit damage, up to a max increase of 30% crit rate and 150% crit damage. Now what this means is, if you build him to have 300% break effect, you are gonna get, and plus with the base crit rate, crit damage that every character has, you'll be at 35% crit rate and 200% crit damage already, which is an insane thing to have without even thinking about relics. So at that point, you can either run a crit rate body with no crit substats across any relics, or you can run whatever body you want and just have some crit rate substats to get you to a good ratio, which is pretty insane, honestly. And you don't have to run any crit damage because you're already at 200%. He's already going to be very good on crit damage, just with the base 50 crit damage plus the 150 you'll get from having 300% break effect. So building break effect on him is going to be the way to go, and that just makes him very easy to build because you really only need to focus on attack and break effect for the most part, and then just make sure your crit rate is high enough to have that good ratio. Then for Ascension 4, when Boothill's in the standoff state, he's going to take less damage from the other enemies that are not in the standoff state with him. So this could just be a good quality of life thing, but again, if you have a good enough sustain, it's not really going to be too crazy of a thing to deal with. Then for his Ascension 6 trace, when he's in standoff and when he gains a pocket trick shot, he will get 10 energy, and this can also still trigger when you are at the maximum 3 trick shot, pocket trick shot stats. So this is going to be very good as well, just to give him some extra energy, and since his ultimate is relatively cheap as we've seen, this is going to help him have a better uptime for that physical weakness application. And for his stat traces, he gets 37% break effect, which is very good for him, since you do want to get up to 300 for the Ascension 2 trace. You get 18% attack, and then you get some HP, which is like, sure, I guess they had to give him a stat there. It is what it is. And then before I go into Eidolons real quick, they have his base stats over here. 107 speed, I really mainly just look at the speed here. 107 is very good, so pairing that with a speed boot, you're going to be very close to 134, which I think him being at least 134 is definitely a priority here, just so you can get as many actions as you can to get as much toughness damage and break damage on the enemy as possible. So you shouldn't need too many speed stats to go above 134, so depending on your relic luck, you could go for some slightly higher break points, but also do remember that you do want to have a ton of break effect on him as well. So lastly, to go over his Eidolons real quick to round out his kit for my light spenders or even like whales that might want to get some extra copies. So for E1, he gets a stack of Pocket Trick Shot for free at the start of battle, and he can ignore 16% of the enemy's defense when he deals damage, which is going to be very good, not just for, his just using the basic attack regularly, but when you are applying that extra break damage, this is going to make that scale up even more. So you're going to be doing some very strong damage with that. Then for his E2, when he's in standoff and gains Pocket Trick Shot, he is going to recover a skill point and give himself a 30% break effect buff for 2 turns, which is very good. And the extra skill point there just makes him a bit better when it comes to skill points. I don't think he's ever going to be skill point positive, but I do think that and you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe this could make him skill point neutral at that point. So this definitely is very good as well. And also, similar to the trace, with the energy, it can trigger when you gain Pocket Trick Shot stats that exceed the max of 3, but you can't repeatedly trigger this within 1 turn. So they do limit it in that sense, but still being able to recover a skill point is very good. E3 gives some scaling to ultimate and basic attack, which honestly is very good, so that you can get some extra ultimate damage that should scale the delay as well for the ultimate there, and then a basic attack will just give you some extra damage. E4 makes it so that when the enemy targets in standoff is attacked by Boothill, they will get take 12% extra damage, and when Boothill is attacked by the enemy, the effect of him receiving increased damage is offset by 12%. So he takes 12% less damage than what he normally would, which is really good because I think that basically makes his extra damage almost non-existent. It's like 3% at that point when you have max trace level. Then E5 is more scaling to skill and talent, for that extra break damage. Then for his E6, when you trigger the break damage, he's additionally going to deal some extra break damage to the enemy, and he will also deal break damage to adjacent enemies by a smaller multiplier, which is crazy because now a hunt character can attack multiple enemies for the first time. Now you do have to E6, which do I recommend it? Probably not. But if you do love Boothill and you want to get an E6, then Boothill kind of just becomes a pseudo destruction character. So that is Boothill's kit there. So now to move on to his banner, now that we know how he works. So his banner is going to be the same as Fu Xuan's. And starting out with Pela on his banner, Pela is going to be, probably of the three on his banner, the best option for him, just because she can provide a ton of defense shred with her ultimate, and if you're running the resolution light cone on her, you can also give some defense shred on her skill. I mean, not her skill, her basic attack. She could also debuff with her skill, but it's not really important for Boothill here. So Pela can definitely be a solid option, especially if you don't have, some of the break-centric characters like Ruan Mei especially. She could be a good option because the defense shred is going to help for Boothill's overall damage as well. Then, next on the banner, we have Luka, which is a very interesting, character to have on here because when it comes to break teams, I think Boothill is pretty much just going to replace Luka as the main, physical break damage character. But at the same time, Luka does also work on .com, so he is still going to have value there since his kit is more so about applying bleed, whereas Boothill is just about breaking and doing a ton of damage as much as possible. Then lastly, we have Hook, who I think honestly has little to no value for pretty much 99% of accounts, just because there are just better DPSs than her in the game. And when looking at it in a lens of pulling for Boothill, you're not going to get much value out of her because she is supposed to be a DPS character, but she just doesn't live up to pretty much most other DPSs in the game. So now, to answer the big question of the video, should you pull for Boothill? Now, I do think that in decent amount of situations, I would say yes. If you do want to play a break team and you do already have the biggest pieces of the team, which everyone already has Harmony Trailblazer, which is great, but especially if you have Ruan Mei as well, then he's an amazing character to pull for because Ruan Mei's break efficiency is going to help increase certain damage thresholds plus the extra break effect she gets from her trace. Then Harmony MC's super break is going to just make Boothill's damage go even higher than it already is. So that is definitely going to be very good. Even if you don't have those those break effect centered characters, you can still have Boothill in a hyper carry kind of setup. I think he would want to have more actions rather than not, so I think he could work very well with a character like Bronny or Sparkle. Plus they can regenerate skill points in case you do end up using a bunch of skill points. Then also defense shred supports like Pela and Silverwolf could also be good. So yeah, those characters can definitely do extremely well there. Will it be as good as a break team? Probably not, but it still should be, it should work out. I probably will not be able to test Boothill super thoroughly because I won't be pulling for him, but just based on what I've seen and from what I've understood from his kit, I do think that the break effect team is going to be his best comp, but then he could still probably work with a more hyper carry team as long as he's getting some extra actions. Like Dance 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 Ting Yun could probably also help him as well. And the one thing I really do like about Boothill, because I know when I saw that he was going to be Hunt, one of the biggest things I was thinking about was, okay, he's a Hunt character, how are they going to make this work? Because for one, when they drip marketed him, it was before we knew about Apocalyptic Shadow, and we don't even have confirmation that single target, but I know a lot of the community, myself included, is really hoping that it's single target focus because I feel like that's what we really need for an endgame mode. But even without that, he can do, and from what I've seen from creators' experience videos, he can do enough damage to not, to make it not matter that he's a Hunt character. He's still gonna be able to do a ton of damage and get through enemies very quickly. So him being a Hunt character isn't that crazy. You just gotta target one enemy at a time. But I will say the main scenario I would say to not pull Boothill is if your account is already good on DPSs, right? Like if you already have like Acheron, you already have Alka, you already have Jing Liu and Robert de Lune, if you have a bunch of those characters and you're good on DPSs, then Boothill probably doesn't have as much value for you. He is still a very strong character, very good physical DPS, but if your account is already solid on DPSs, then he might not have as much value for you, and I'd probably say if you want to summon for the second half of 2.2, you might want to pull for Fu Xuan, or even pull for Robin before she goes away as a support character, depending on what your account needs. But at the end of the day, always pull for who you like, because Boothill is still very cool, and while I'm skipping him, I know he's going to be really fun to play from what I've seen. So that is my overall analysis on Boothill. So let me know down in the comments below if you plan to pull for Boothill or if you're going to end up skipping. But thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed and haven't already, definitely be sure to hit that subscribe button. The support is greatly appreciated, and I will see you all next time.